friends, welcome back to the channel. It's Tori and I read more books. So we're going to talk about all of the books that I read in July of 2026. I know this wrap up is happening a little bit later than it normally does. The reason for that is because I was finishing up a blogging project that we'll get into later, and I wasn't quite ready to talk about all the books that I'd read in July because some of them were a secret. So we are just gonna get right into it. The first book I read in July has been such a long time coming, okay? This book is a follow-up to one of my favorite fantasy books I've ever read on my booktube channel, and that was Daughter of the Forest. And I picked up Son of the Shadows by Juliet Marillier. Now this was the first book I read in a vlogging project where two of my closest bookish friends basically gave me prompts that I had not seen prior to drawing them out of a jar, and they led me through a journey on my shelves to read some books that I otherwise might not have gotten to for a while. Son of the Shadows was my first vlog pick, and this is my book of the month, and I'm just gonna say that right now. I'm not even gonna make you wait till the end of the video to tell you that, because I have been looking for the last few months. I've been really yearning for a reading 5-star experience, like a reader 5-star that is super immersive, that just makes me feel like I'm in another world, that engages that emotional connection. That's something that I love in the books that I read, and I feel like I've had a lot of analytical 5-stars or like author brain 5-stars this year. But I really, really wanted to have something that just swept me away. Coldfire Trilogy got really close. I had some moments of that in Coldfire Trilogy, and I absolutely loved that series. But I wanted something that you get to the point where you forget that you're reading a story and you just become part of the world, and you care so much about the characters that it's almost a little tricky to come back to reality. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. If you don't, I'm so sorry, and I really hope you have that experience soon. Son of the Shadows is book 2 in the Seven Waters series by Juliet Marillier, and I should have known that Juliet Marillier was going to be that reader experience, and I don't know why it took me 2 years. 2 years to continue this series. It's a crime, and I apologize, and I intend on doing a fair share of penance on that decision. But Son of the Shadows was phenomenal. This is a Irish mythology and folklore inspired kind of druidic vibe. It's not epic fantasy per se. It does have romance in it. It has a lot of, it's kind of a family generational dramatic fantasy, if that makes sense. And this book has one of the most beautiful romances I've read in a while. That doesn't mean that it's perfect. It doesn't mean that it's easy. It is messy. It is full of two people trying desperately to build a life after learning, especially one of the two characters, after learning not to trust anyone, who's been incredibly broken by the experiences that they've had since childhood. And it is Juliet Marillier's ability to write trauma healing in all of its honesty is something I love about her. She doesn't sensationalize it. She does not make it a gimmick in her stories. It is honest, and it is beautiful, and it is heartbreaking. If you've been around my channel for longer than 5 minutes, I am notorious for being very picky about romance in any genre, and Juliet Marillier just continues to prove why I love her work and why her very messy characters work for me. Is so good. This is such a good book, you guys. This was my book of the month. I would be shocked if it's not on my top 10 for the year by the end of 2026, because this was such an incredible follow-up to Daughter of the Forest. Highly recommend. If Daughter of the Forest is the only one you've read, please continue. And it just, I'm going to be reading a lot more Juliet Marillier very soon because I love the experience of reading her work. Next up, I got asked to be part of an impromptu buddy read and discussion with my good friends John and Jacob over at Talking Story and Joanna from Joanna Reads. Joanna reached out to me and she was like, hey, we're going to be reading and discussing The Shawshank Redemption by Stephen King. Do you want to join in? Now, I have no idea what made her ask me specifically, because as you guys would know, this is not really my typical cup of tea. I'm not a big Stephen King fan. I've only finished one of his books prior to this. I knew nothing about the film. I'd never seen it. I didn't know anything about the story, which was the perfect way to go into that reading experience and discussion, I think, because I was jumping in with a completely blank slate. And Joanna and I actually ended up having a fantastic discussion even prior to the official discussion that we had, which I will link below or up here. If it's not up here, it's down in the description. We had a fantastic group conversation about it. But beforehand, there are some things that happen in this story at the beginning where we are introduced to some of the darker aspects of prison life. I really struggled with that, and some of the content was a bit triggering for me to read. Joanna and I had a discussion about that, again, prior to our official discussion, where we were discussing the difference in reading experiences and why certain things get that kind of visceral reaction. A lot of times when I talk about graphic content or violent content, sexual content, etc. in the books that I read, one of the most common responses that I get from people who maybe either don't agree with me or think I'm being a little too harsh on the content or whatever it might be is, well, yeah, but that's realistic. Now, I know that most of the time people mean well when they say that, but it's actually one of my least favorite comments to get on any kind of discussion I'm having about the content of a book. And here's why. Without intending to, often, that sentence kind of suggests that the person who is bringing up the issues they have with that content, or the experience they've had with it, doesn't know that it's realistic. And I can tell you that that's never the case for me. I never read a book and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe that they put that in there, and not think, that could happen to someone. I know that. And the thing I was finally able to articulate while talking to Joanna about this book, and the book on itself, I didn't feel like handled the content poorly necessarily. It just brought up this conversation. There's a difference between reading something and having the experience in the book, right? You're going through things with the character and you experience things, you can empathize with them to whatever degree. And that can be really hard by itself. When things like that, when darker or harder content things happen, there's a level that I would consider hyper-realism, right? Where not only are you experiencing the character's reality of what's happening on page, which can be really disturbing and uncomfortable, insert whatever word here, by itself, but then with that hyper-realism, if you've experienced something in whatever way similar to what's happening on page, now you're not just experiencing the character's reality, you have the added layer of your own experience and trauma, which creates a completely different level of it's realistic. And that's the thing I think that makes me so frustrated when people use that as a comeback to me bringing up issues with content in whatever book, because it's like, yes, I know it's realistic. It's, for me, often hyper-realistic, which is a completely different experience. So let me actually talk about the book now. The book was okay. It was fine. I wasn't blown away by it. The film, however, was fantastic. This is definitely the kind of story that I feel was benefited immensely by its adaptation into film, which there's not a ton of movies that I'll say that about. This is definitely one of them. By itself, this book is just fine. It's just fine. I don't think it's particularly inspired. There were some things I didn't love about it, but the film was really, really excellent. And the portrayals of Martin Freeman and Tim Robbins as the kind of main two characters were phenomenal. Not that that was surprising to me. But yeah, movie was fantastic. I've read the book. Meh, it's fine, but the movie was really good. And the discussion was fantastic. We had a really good time digging into the story, so I really do encourage you to go watch that. And I will save the rest of my thoughts on the it's realistic comments for its own video, because I do feel like I have a lot to say about that, and now that I have been able to articulate it in a better way with Joanna through that conversation, I think that could be its own topic video, and I would love to talk to you guys more about it there. Next up, I got to my second prompt read for my Besties vlog, and that was Band of Brothers by Stephen E. Ambrose. This is the story of the men from Easy Company, which was a company within the 101st Airborne Division during World War II. Very, very famous division of the war, and I was not ready for the amount of detail that this book brought to the table. It's incredible. This book is a feat of storytelling and historical preservation. This is the kind of book that I think we need more of. It includes some of the actual interviews and words directly from the men who were in Easy Company, who survived the war, and that kind of direct account is so important. It's so important for the preservation of history. Anyways, I am looking forward to watching the TV show just because I think my brain gets a little scrambled with the level of detail that is in this kind of stuff that isn't necessarily always attached to a person or a character. So when it comes to how many clips of ammunition they used before they moved 50 feet this direction, and then it was, you know, there's so many little infinitesimal details that are included in this that my brain just kind of goes fuzzy after a while. And so I think watching it in the TV show after having read the book is just going to solidify what I loved about the story and how impressed I was by the story of these men. I would say that for somebody who's not used to that level of detail in military nonfiction, it might be a little much, but honestly, also the men that you follow through the story are really compelling people in different ways, and I just think that it's a phenomenal historical account, and I think more people should read it. Then I got to This Kingdom Will Not Kill Me by Ilona Andrews, which is a husband and wife team, if you didn't know that. I didn't know that until somewhat recently. And this is a new release from this year that has been making the rounds on BookTube, and I had never read anything by Ilona Andrews before, so I borrowed it from my library and decided to check it out. And the beginning, the setup of this book was so fascinating. It is a portal fantasy, which isn't usually my favorite. I'm not usually a huge fan of those, but it was a woman, 20-something-year-old woman, who got portaled into the grim, dark world of her favorite fantasy series. And the setup of it was so bleak, and it was so like intense and gripping in the very beginning of the book that I actually was kind of surprised at how fast I was hooked by the premise and the idea of it and the characters that our main protagonist, Maggie, was meeting as she was going through this world. And it was interesting to see what she could change and influence because she knew the story. And then about halfway through the book, there's a reveal / change in direction of the story where the romance tropes started coming in, and it was like that just took over everything, and the world itself and everything that had been kind of front and center prior to that became sort of yesterday's newspaper a little bit. I don't know, to borrow some terms, it's one of those like dark brooding kind of bad boy romances where he's very possessive even after she tells him repeatedly that she's not interested. And to me, that's an immediate yuck. So I didn't love it. It was really awkward, and the main character goes from being this really like analytical, I'm gonna think through how to survive in this world and everything, and then when she's around this other character, suddenly she becomes a wet blanket and just flops back and forth. I ended up giving this one 3 stars because I really did like the premise and a lot of aspects of this book. And the romance just kind of killed it for me. And it was so tropey. It was so tropey, and it really ended up just kind of tanking toward the end. And there were some moments where I got actually really angry at the book and the characters. I honestly don't get into a lot of new releases, so I was glad to be able to be part of the discussion and know what people are talking about, which is rare when it comes to new releases for me. But at the end of the day, I don't know. I do have another Ilona Andrews book that I want to try. But I have heard that the romance style and tropes that were utilized in This Kingdom Will Not Kill Me are pretty par for the course when it comes to these authors, and that makes me less excited to continue trying their stuff. It's just one of those things where it's not for me, and I wasn't a big fan. Next up, my third prompt for the bestie vlog was the Thousandth first step in this cultivation fantasy series by Wong. This is the MERRICK Books Kickstarter prototype that I was given by my friend Andrew's Wizardly Reads. And the book itself is absolutely beautiful. And again, there are still copies of it, I believe, on the MERRICK Books website, which I will, again, try to remember to put in the bottom of the description. But look at this, you guys. Absolutely stunning artwork in this book. What an incredible, beautiful piece of work. Love it. Our main character, Wu Ying, is discovering that he has some skill for cultivation, and he gets swept off going to the magic school and fighting mythical creatures and fighting the bullies and all of the things. And it was a solid, in my opinion, gateway into cultivation fantasy. Not that I have a ton of experience with that, so, you know, there are definitely people that would know more about that than I do. But I thought it was an okay gateway. There were some things, content-wise, that I just didn't love. The schoolyard bully trope is one that I really dislike because it gets overused so much, and if there's a character that's a schoolyard bully, fine. But in this book, it's like every single character, except for a couple, act like bullies toward our main character because he's a peasant, because he's, you know, mastering cultivation at a different pace than everybody else, because. And it just got really, I don't know, tiring after a while. I really liked a lot of the world building in this. A lot of the description of that cultivation magic was really interesting, was really vibrant and well described. I also, there was a little bit in here where it talks about women with cultivation fantasy and how they get more and more and more beautiful and flawless as they like get smarter and able to cultivate more, because it just turns their body into like the ultimate version of itself, which I didn't love because I don't think that like flawlessness and a specific beauty standard is like the goal in life. So that part wasn't my favorite. But again, I think some really beautiful descriptions of the magic itself. It felt, you could feel the cultural influence coming through the story and the beautiful way that like the mythical creatures are described, and it's a world that just feels immediately very magical, which I did love. You know, I don't know that cultivation fantasy is for me. However, I'm glad that I read it. Okay guys, we're gonna pause super quickly because I have to tell you about a project that I am working on currently that I am so excited about, and you're gonna be hearing me talk about it a lot, so buckle up. My epic fantasy book, The Bloodstones, book 1 in Legends of the Bruhai, is an ancient, dark epic fantasy. This series is my love letter to the epic tales of characters who I hope will stick with my readers long after they close the final page of the books. Every author dreams of creating a special edition of their book that looks like the most beautiful version you can possibly imagine. And I have had the opportunity to work with some truly incredible artists on this project. And the Kickstarter link for the pre-launch is down below in the description box. You can follow along. It will be launching officially on October 2nd so that you can get your own copy of this beautiful story. If you want to listen to the audiobook before then to see if you like it, go down in my description box again and you will find a link to a Golden Griffin Press channel where you can listen to the entire audiobook for free. I literally cannot wait to hold this special edition in my hands. I cannot wait to send it to all of you guys that are going to be backing the Kickstarter. Thank you so much for your consideration, for your support, for all the encouragement that I've been getting about my books. You guys are the absolute best, and October cannot come soon enough. And with that, back to the video. Next up, I got in some more manga this month, and the first series that I started was Witch Hat Atelier, volumes 1 through 3. This has a little bit of a Hogwarts feel, but manga/anime instead. It has that academia, magic academia vibe. It's a beautifully drawn manga. It's probably one of my favorite manga art styles that I've ever seen. The characters are beautifully designed, the world is beautiful, the composition of the frames within the manga are really beautiful, and we have a young girl who suffers a pretty major tragedy at the beginning of the book and goes on a quest to try to learn magic and reverse what has happened. And she meets some friends and allies and acquaintances along the way, and has a mentor figure who is a stronger magician, obviously, than she is, and is teaching her her first steps into that world. And it is the first couple of volumes, I was like, okay, this is really beautiful. It's feeling a little tropey with the magic academia kind of stuff. Volume 3 hooked me like crazy. It hinted at the wider world and some of the deeper elements of the culture and the sects within the magic ability people, the magic users of this world, the witches. Really, really fascinating. Volume 3 really hooked me, and I was very excited to continue after reading that. And the characters became a lot more endearing, I think, in that third volume. So I am here. I can completely see why everybody has been talking about this series. I am really enjoying my first kind of tiptoe into it, and I'm definitely excited to continue. Next up, I read 3 more volumes of Cat Plus Gamer, which was 4, 5, and 6. This is the story of a late 20s, mid-20s, late 20s young woman who has a 9-to-5. She's single, and she goes home to her 2 cats. And it's her first time ever being a pet parent, and it is just delightful because it is so nerdy, and it is also so realistic in the experiences we have as pet parents, especially with cats. And I love that about it so much. I adored the first 3 volumes of this manga and was excited to continue. Now, I will say that in these 3 volumes, the personification of the cats actually increased a little bit in some of the sections of the manga, and I didn't love that. What I loved so much about the beginning of the manga was that the cats still felt like cats, whereas in these 3 volumes, especially 5 and 6, it started leaning more toward personification than I really was enjoying. So I don't know that I enjoyed these 3 as much as the first 3, and I am really curious to see, we only have 2 volumes left, where it ends and like how, if that continues through to the end of the manga or not. But I'm hoping to finish those last 2 volumes very soon. It is a really wholesome, really sweet series, and I highly recommend it, even as a gateway manga for anybody who is just looking for something lighthearted and fun. Next, we had my 4th prompt for the Bestie vlog, and that was 6 Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim. This is based on the mythology of the 7 swans, where we have a sister whose brothers get turned into swans by an enchantress, and she has to go on a quest to turn them back, save them, save the kingdom, etc. And this is a Asian-inspired version of that, with a young woman who is a princess who has a little bit of sensitivity to magic, and her brothers get turned into 6 crimson cranes. Now, this is kind of jumping off from the same mythology point that Daughter of the Forest by Juliet Marillier did, which is why I was so excited to read it in the first place, and also one of my favorite covers that I own. I absolutely love this cover. And I had not read anything by Elizabeth Lim before. I now have several more books of hers because I really enjoyed this. This is a YA. It has a little bit of a romantic subplot that I actually enjoyed toward the end. And there were a few bits in the middle that did get a little bit, that dragged a little bit. But one of the things I will say about this is there were some reveals in this that subverted my expectations of what I thought the book was going to do. I was expecting one version of this kind of mythological progression of the story, and it took a twist toward the end that I really appreciated. I always get excited when authors can take something that feels really familiar and put a new twist on it that doesn't feel egregious. It doesn't feel like they're just, throwing something at the wall and seeing if it sticks. It feels very purposeful. It feels like a subversion that's interesting. And Elizabeth Lim definitely pulled that off with this book. And it makes me very excited to read more from her. I do think that this is a fantastic YA book. I think it has a very well realized world. There's a lot of really interesting folklore that's kind of sprinkled into the rest of it. There's dragons. There are enchantresses, obviously. There are kind of shapeshifter-esque characters. And the main character is just so determined to protect and bring her brothers back. Because it's YA, the sibling relationships aren't quite as deep or well realized, in my opinion, as they're done in Daughter of the Forest, but I still really enjoyed this. It was a solid 4-star read, and I do recommend it. Next up, we read for our book club, which is my husband and I and 2 of our friends from college. We realized that this is our 10th year doing this book club, where each one of the 4 of us picks a book, a movie, and an album, music album, and over the span of 3 months, we watch, listen, and read, and then we get together in person and discuss it, usually over some delicious food. And it was my friend Grunky's pick for this one, and he chose Endurance by Alfred Lansing. This is the story of an explorer named Ernest Shackleton, who in the early 1900s did an expedition on a ship called the Endurance to the Antarctic, and his intent was to make the South Pole, essentially. And if you don't know anything about this, I'm not going to tell you a whole lot, other than sometimes what humans are willing to subject themselves to in the name of exploration and discovery blows my mind. Really I think of myself as a fairly adventurous person, and then I read things like this, and I'm like, maybe I'm more of a homebody than I thought I was, but what a miraculous story of survival in just some of the most incredibly intense natural circumstances that they should not, humans were not built for the things that these humans went through in this book. There's a level of camaraderie, I think, that you can only achieve in situations like this. And it is a pretty miraculous story. If you haven't read it and you are interested in historical nonfiction accounts of survival at the most incredible odds that you can possibly imagine, this is a very, very easily readable, accessible book. So I feel like this would be one that I would recommend to a lot of different people if they're interested in it, as long as, there's some contextual things about the time period that we're in that felt a little odd now living in the 21st century, but overall, it's an incredible story. The next one is Death Masks by Jim Butcher, which is book 5 in the Dresden Files. My experience with Dresden so far, I will just recap very briefly, is that I think Butcher's world building and the way he's incorporating mythology, folklore, mythical creatures, etc. is so good. And there's some character work in this series that is just S tier, chef's kiss. I love it. I want more of it. And therein lies the rub, because I feel like so much of these books is like a crumb trail of the things I love about Dresden, and a whole lot of all the stuff that I just am not as interested in or just flat out don't like. This was the first book where I really kind of sat and realized I'm not seeing growth in Dresden as a character, really. Since book one, I feel like he hasn't really learned a whole lot, which is a little concerning, especially about his way of describing women. And it's not just like a woman that he finds attractive. It is literally almost every woman that walks across the page, unless there's a qualifier that, oh, she's ugly, so we're not going to get that same description of her, which that's its own problem. And also, in this book specifically, there is a scene that happens where Dresden handles a situation with a younger female character that I was really bothered by, and I had been warned by people going into it that it was there. I did end up having a pretty major problem with it, because there's really no possible way that you can look at that scene and put a positive spin on it. There's literally no way to do it, which was a huge bummer, because Death Masks, I think, really explodes the larger conflict of the world and the different sects of creatures around the world. You get some really interesting ancient lore drops in this book, and there's more of a presence of the Knights of the Cross, which I'm a huge fan of them as characters, and again, I just wanted more of them. It was kind of like dangling the carrot through the entire book, where it was like, hey, here's the Knights, and they're super, super cool, and there's all these things that's like interesting, that are interesting about them, and they'll be in maybe 10% of the book. The parts that I like, I really love, and that's why I've continued the series up to this point, because I'm so desperate to get more of those things and those characters. And I'm definitely going to be taking a break after this book for a while, because the frustration I had with Harry as a character reached an all-time high in book 5, which is funny because a lot of people were like, oh, if you just get through the first couple of books, you'll be good. I'm still here. I'm still waiting for growth, honestly, and I'm not seeing as much of it as I would like. So, I don't know where I'm sitting with Dresden. I'm just kind of percolating on it right now, and I'm having discussions about it with people I know that love the series, but I can see why people like it, because there are aspects of it that I love, and I also have a lot of issues with it. So, moving on, we got a story from Scott Lynch in the world of The Gentleman Bastard. And it was Locke, Lamora, and the Bottled Serpent. This came out in the Grimdark magazine. I can't remember exactly when. It's been a little while. But I downloaded the Kindle. It's like 47 pages for this short story, and read it. And I was so happy to be back in Kamome with Locke and the other characters. This takes place kind of right at the beginning area of where Lies of Locke Lamora starts up, and it shows a little bit of Locke's training to become the thief and con man that he is. And I didn't love it, I'll be honest. I felt like it focused so heavily on a secondary character that I wasn't that interested in, and I didn't really feel like he added anything to the world that was interesting or compelling. And Locke just kind of took more of a background seat to the rest of the story. Like, he was in it and he was involved, but I didn't really feel like it was about him. And that bummed me out a little bit, just because being back in the world, that's what I was looking for, is more Locke and the crew. But I'm really, really glad that Scott Lynch is back in the world and that he's been working on it, and I'm just excited to see what he does next with it, because I know there's some plans for further adventures in the world of Gentleman Bastard. So yeah, the story was okay. It was fine. I didn't particularly like it that much, but I was really happy to see him kind of being back in the world, taking that step in however he needs to do that. And as an author, I can honestly appreciate sometimes just needing to do something easy and fun in the world you've already created, just to kind of reignite your drive to get back into the story. So I hope that that's what it did for him, and I guess we'll just have to wait and find out. So anyways, that is everything that I read in July. And like I mentioned before, Son of the Shadows was my book of the month for July. What an incredible read. 5 stars, no notes. There were things that I could nitpick about this book, there were some things that I definitely didn't love, but the story overall I loved so much, and it was such an incredible reading experience that I'm just thrilled to have been back in Juliet Marillier's writing. It was wonderful. So I would like to know down in the comments below what you guys are reading. I want to know what your favorite book of July was, what you're excited to read next, or what you're reading right now. And I hope that you are having a fantastic week. I hope you are reading some 5-star reads, and I'll see you in the next video.